Thank you very much, Wayne. Give me just a second. This PowerPoint is up, but then it's not. I think it was because of the Mac. Yeah, there it is. Okay. All right,
Okay,
so I'll try to troubleshoot myself in the background and hopefully everything will be okay.
Thank you.
Okay, give me just a second. This PowerPoint is, you can see it, right? Everybody's okay, right?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay.
It's
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, so I'll get started then. I was hearing myself from the recording, I think. Okay, so first off, I just started teaching maybe 2.5 years ago when COVID started. I started teaching at Weill Cornell. Previously, I was in another university where I was in charge of developing our extensive reading program. We had a foundation program there where we separated the classes into kind of an integrated core sort of class, and then a special reading and a special writing class. And I was actually person in management, working with the library and developing a graded readers program. We have many of our people that were actually working with Tom Robb for advice with mReader and some of these things. But anyway, we purchased thousands of books with the library, and we developed our own variation of the mReader Kyoto scale, which I did want to show you. I can pull it up here. I have it out. Okay, there's my, so if I change the new share. Yeah, okay, so our scale, which I believe you can see now, looked something like this. You can see the R001 there and the R002. We had two different reading courses. And if they were in the intermediate course, the R002, they were doing what we called level 4 through level 9. Now, the program, we had a certain amount of points that they needed to acquire throughout the semester to get an A, B, C, D, and we gave points based on what level book they read. Now, there are good things here and bad things. Some of them would try to read a bunch of level 9 books on the mReader there, and they would not be successful, and they would be reading a lot of different books. Others would never leave level 4, and that had its own problems within there. I'll continue. This is sort of an introduction to what happened within that program. Now, if we look at the Kyoto scale itself, this is from the mReader website. You can see some interesting numbers as we go up from B1, B2, C1. Within my current institution, we use the TOEFL IBT, so I did a little integrating so I could understand this a little better. That the IBT figures are coming from the TOEFL. You've got the TOEFL on the left-hand side, and then the IBT. This was from something I found on Kaplan's website. But what was interesting is, look at this jump. You go within the B1, and B1 is quite extensive within the CEFR, but look at this jump. You've got 6 to 7, and you're looking at a score difference of 45 to 80, then 80 to 100, and 120 as you go up the levels. Whereas the smaller ones, of course, it makes sense that the smaller levels, you're going to have faster gains in the more beginner levels. But I just wanted to draw your attention because that does cause some problems. Now, credit to Paul Goldberg here with the X reading. You can see 8, 9, and 10, 11, 12, and 13. He's got maybe more nuanced levels. Maybe you could comment on that later in the questions section. But I think that's been, that may be quite useful there within this context. One other one, I'm a father, and my son is actually reading Nate the Great. So if anyone's using some of these young reader native speaker series that are also graded, we can't forget that if we look at 1st through 5th grade, oftentimes the readers that L1 students are using are also graded in a specific way. And this has also been from the mReader Kyoto scale website. It's just an interesting footnote. Okay. Now, this is the interesting problem or the benefits that we found. between one program and the other. At the reading one level in my previous university, and I think most people who use extensive reading within their reading programs will notice that, yes, we get the students reading. Their vocabulary sizes do increase because they encounter many different words at the lower levels there. And their reading fluency increases. The speed at which they're reading, how they deal with new words, they just get faster, they get better, and they have a better comprehension of what they're reading from encountering many different words and different texts. Now, the problems we have with more advanced readers or higher intermediate is you start to get to these plateaus. Like I said, the reading twos, they didn't want to push themselves further. And depending on your academic context, your students may be trying to bridge to authentic texts in English medium instruction. That's what I've seen more and more with the previous university I was in, and in Cornell, where I am now. They're advanced level students, and we don't use graded readers because the goal is to get them to work with more authentic texts. But the problem is they've already acquired a lot of language, so trying to get them to learn and incorporate some reading strategies has proved a little bit difficult. So just to give you more context with my personal problem, I was teaching reading 2 primarily in the previous university, and we'd have some of these nice graded readers. You may be familiar with them. Even 1984 has got a kind of an abridged version. And in 2000, I came in and started working at Weill Cornell, and they said, oh, well, our students are reading translations of Tolstoy's The Death of Ivan Ilyich, The Plague with an English translation, where the word hitherto is quite overused in the translation from Camus. They really had to deal with a lot of these more authentic texts. And it was a challenge for me as a teacher, to be honest. And I'm sure it's a challenge for the students. Okay, so again, looking at the extensive reading foundations definition of what exactly graded readers are, they're readers that have the syntax and lexis controlled in order to make the content accessible, which again is great for the lower levels. But when you get to the higher one, you reach these plateauing drawbacks, especially if you're working with students that are going to English medium instruction. So how do we deal with these? Oh, well, okay, sorry, this is my problem again that I highlighted. You can see levels 7, 8, and 9 with that B1 to B2. Just as a side note, I want to tell you a little bit more about my Cornell students. I did a quick vocabulary test with them when they were just coming in. The British National Corpus, there's Paul Nation's test that tries to find what level they're on according to frequency, and also can estimate the vocabulary size. You can find this at lextutor.ca. But I found that most of my students in this semester's bunch have a vocabulary size of 10,000 words, and they're working at a frequency level of 6,000 to 7,000 words. So I've also got TOEFL IBT estimated scores on them right now, and they're in the high 90s to 100s. So, I mean, they have to bridge. I could not use graded readers from what's out there for the most part. I would have to find something more bridging for authentic texts. So they have to learn to deal with these. Oop, there we go. Okay. All right, so I have several strategies that I use with them. And the first thing is we need to get them to become independent learners. Neil Anderson had a model for metacognition that's really nice. He talks about, preparing and planning for learning, selecting and using various learning strategies, monitoring that strategy use, and then orchestrating various strategies and evaluating strategy use and learning. What he's focusing on here is the idea that each individual learner is different, And that needs to be taken into consideration. I tell my wife this all the time. I can't read your mind. And this is what I tell my students. I can't read your mind. So they have to know what they don't know, right? They're the ones. I think this is one of the things with frequency-based vocabulary instruction is that we assume that learners, we do, I mean, scientifically, we look at that learners encounter so many different words, but when you get to a certain advanced level, if they're not independently looking at what they need to learn and focusing on that as they read, then they're going to not be able to help in their own gains. I know this is somewhat of a separate thing, but I think of extensive reading and student reading development in the context of weightlifting. You know, when they first start out, you get those big gains and the huge muscles, but you don't get those, the body of Thor, if you will. I always tell them that you'll never get the body of Thor if you don't push yourself a little bit and work a little harder and try to work on those areas that they really have more trouble with. So that's the first thing. Get them to understand that this is about them and they need to have that independence and find the strategies that work for them. Now, the first strategy that I teach them is miscue analysis. And I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with this, but of course, we look at fluency as being a function of speed and accuracy. And that's what's done with mReader. And, you know, you read a certain amount of books within a certain amount of time. I'm sure there's speedy reading activities used in many of your classes as well. But of course, the idea with extensive reading is that it should be done at I-1. And so I go back to that driving analogy with my students. A fluent driver will navigate new obstacles fairly well and fairly quickly. And that will increase their speed. And I look at vocabulary words, I teach it to them the same way. You know, not that I'm encouraging F1 driving out there or anything, but I want them to be able to, when they encounter these new vocabulary words, if they're more familiar with them, they'll be able to kind of speed through and increase their speed, right? They won't be stuck on these words. So miscue analysis, you may or may not be familiar with it. It's used often with grade school level kids in an ESL setting in the US, where you have the student read for 1 minute, and the teacher, usually in the ESL setting, will listen because they'll be reading out loud, circling any words that they mispronounce. And if there's a mispronouncing of the word, then it's assumed that the student is having trouble decoding the word and that the student doesn't know the word. So you would subtract that. That's an obstacle. That's a bump there in the road that they weren't able to handle. And they'd subtract that word from their reading fluency. For college students that are of an advanced level, honestly, they question it. Why am I doing this? You know? So I have a chart for them usually that I put into this PowerPoint. It's I'll show you what it looks like here if I do my new share. And yeah, oh, that's not it. Hold on, that's not what I wanted. I want this one. One of their assignments for me is that they have to, we have a 14-week semester, and usually by week 7, sometimes they've honestly dropped off and stopped doing it. But so I've shortened it this time, but I want them to get used to the strategy. And so 3 times a week, I ask them to put numbers into this Excel sheet, which, okay, so let's say we read 245 words without a problem. And then we have the words that we missed, maybe 5. Oops, sorry, 245, this is supposed to be the date. And then we have 5, and then 240. There's a nice little graph. What's nice is they sort of, okay, there it is. They can watch their reading speed develop over 14 weeks. And so they're able to see if they do this 3 times a week, what happens. And it's only 3 minutes out of their week. Well, maybe 5 because of the counting. But I have had many students who honestly did this come out and say that they saw their vocabulary develop quite rapidly and they felt more comfortable with new words. Okay, so then we have vocabulary logs. Everybody loves vocabulary logs. With the advanced learners, it tends to be a good thing, actually, because I like what Fohl says about this. It says that it's a way that they can direct learners' attention to and help them develop that metacognitive knowledge of their own learning processes. And it's a self-directed way to learn. There's increased exposure. And what's nice is within the context of our class, we have them take those words and use them later from the reading to the writing. So they're actually learning new vocabulary they can use in their writing with what they read. How do I make sure they do that? Well, okay, sorry, I promise I'll get to that. A vocabulary log entry, I just wanted to show you what ours look like. We have the word, we have the part of speech, the dictionary definition they find, the word family and or derivatives of the base word that they find there, the sample sentence from the dictionary, and moving from the reading side of it to the writing, then we have them practice with a sample sentence first. Later, they implement it in their essays as well. This is the rubric. I just wanted to say that when we look at this, we don't look for grammatical usage. We look for correct usage of the word within the context. Okay. No, where'd it go? Okay, so I wanted to add about that in the first semester, we have them for the first couple minutes of the class introduce 1 to 2 new words that they found from reading that week or whatever else class they had. And then they will teach the rest of the class, and those words that are produced from that group that week will be used on an exam later or will be tested. We'll ask them to try to use those words within their writing later in the separate writing class. So it's been a good integration. Okay, well, good, I got through there. So then we have the question. All right, I said that I was doing these other different strategies to have them. Oh, by the way, sorry, backing up. The presentations that I have them do in the first semester, it's maybe 2 to 3 minutes with the new words that they have, and they try to make it memorable using hangman with the class, or they show a picture to give context to the new words. But in the spring semester, I actually have it where they're teaching the class for 20 minutes. And yes, we do all read the same books. And that's what I'm getting at. I'm coming from medical college, and these are all authentic texts that they work with. And one of the nice things here, again, Krashen talks about the benefits of narrow reading. I didn't realize I was doing narrow reading when I started doing this. But, you know, Krashen says that narrow readers gain more contextual knowledge as they read narrowly. The more one reads in one area, like applied linguistics, medicine, the more one learns about that area. And the easier one finds subsequent reading in the area. And it's a 7-year program, so this is a good start for them to the introduction to the culture and where they're going. And there it is. That's what I was going to say. The reading is extensive within my class, and they do have 30 to 40 pages for the first semester that they're doing, and then 80 to 100 pages per week in the second semester. Now, what about the quizzes? Yes, I give them my own quizzes. In the fall, we start out every week with the quizzes in the beginning, 10 questions. They're fairly easy. They're open book. We try to reduce the anxiety, but they're still there. Did you read? In the second semester, I told you we have those in-class presentations, 20 minutes or so. Well, after the group that's up there is trying to prepare them with discussion questions on what will be on the quiz and things like this. So it becomes kind of a more reading community centered experience. And they try to prepare all of the students for the quizzes that they have at the end of those presentations. So these are kind of my overarching classroom methods for the authentic texts. Here are my references. And I'll be honest, I'm realizing that this is an older version of the presentation, but my points are still here. I'm happy to share this full presentation with the extensive reading foundation later. But this is what I have. Are there any questions?